moments when convicted women defied all expectations. They entered the courts without posture, but what they did made even the judges tremble, not with fear, but with indignation. In this video, we'll dive into chilling cases of crimes committed by women that shocked the world and marked the judicial system in unimaginable ways. And get ready. The last case is the most disturbing of them all. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and stay until the end to learn about the darkest stories of justice. The Mother of Duburg, the dark history of Mary Beth Tinning. In a small town called Duburg, New York, on September 11, 1942, a girl was born whom no one could imagine would become one of the darkest figures in American criminal history. Mary Beth, as she was called, had an apparently ordinary life in her early years. She worked as a waitress, drove school buses, and eventually found her place as a nursing assistant at Ellis Hospital in Schenectady. The year 1965 seemed promising when Mary Beth married Joe Tinning. The couple dreamed of a large, happy family, and this dream began to come true in 1967 when they had their first child. In the following years, Mary Beth would give birth to 8 more children, completing a family of 9 children. However, what should have been a story of joy and maternal love would transform into one of the most disturbing narratives in New York State. The first tragedy occurred in 1972, when Jennifer, at just 8 days old, left this world. Doctors attributed the death to meningitis and brain abscesses, an explanation that, although sad, seemed natural enough not to raise suspicions. But this was just the beginning of a series of inexplicable losses that would strike the Tinning family. One by one, the couple's children began to pass away: Joseph, Barbara, Timothy, Nathan, Mary Frances, Jonathan, and Michael. Each death brought a different explanation, but none completely satisfactory. The medical community began to notice a disturbing pattern, but the deaths continued without conclusive explanation. It was only with the death of Tam Lynn, the 9th and last child, at just 4 months old, that authorities finally initiated a thorough investigation. The year was 1987, and what would emerge from this investigation would shock the entire community. Under intense interrogation, Mary Beth finally confessed to suffocating at least 4 of her children. Experts who analyzed the case suggested that Mary Beth might have suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a mental disorder where the caregiver causes harm to people under their care to obtain attention and sympathy. This hypothesis, though never officially confirmed, offered a possible explanation for such incomprehensible acts. The court convicted Mary Beth of second-degree murder for the death of Tammy Lynn, sentencing her to 20 years to life in prison. Today, she remains detained at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women, where all her parole requests have been systematically denied. The story of Mary Beth Tinning continues to intrigue and disturb those who study it. How could a mother commit such acts against her own children? The case raised important questions about maternal mental health, child protection systems, and the signs that society might have missed along the way. The legacy of this dark story serves as a reminder of the importance of community vigilance and proper mental health support. The 9 young lives lost in the Tinning tragedy were not forgotten. They became a painful example of the need for greater attention to signs of child abuse and severe mental disorders. At Bedford Hills, Mary Beth Tinning continues her life sentence, carrying with her the secrets and motivations that led her to commit such acts against those she should have protected. Her story remains one of the most disturbing narratives of serial infanticide in the United States, a dark reminder of how appearances can deceive and how motherhood, in extremely rare and disturbing cases, can transform into something terrible. Aileen Wuornos, a tragic trajectory. In the small town of Rochester, Michigan, on February 29, 1956, Aileen Wuornos was born, a girl whose life would become one of the most notorious criminal stories in the United States. No one could predict that this child would become one of the most famous serial killers in American history, with her case generating not only sensationalist headlines, but also deep debates about justice, violence, and society. Between 1989 and 1990, a series of homicides began to draw authorities' attention. The pattern was clear. Men were found dead in isolated locations, their belongings stolen, their lives ended with precise shots. What made these crimes particularly intriguing was that all evidence pointed to a woman, something rare in the universe of serial murders. The crimes spread across 3 states, Florida, Michigan, and Ohio, creating a trail of violence that left authorities perplexed. 7 men lost their lives in this series of crimes that seemed endless. The method was always similar. Victims were lured to isolated locations where they met their fatal destiny. In 1991, an intense manhunt began. The search for Aileen Wuornos became one of the most mediatized cases of the time. When finally captured, she was no longer just a murder suspect. She had become a figure that fascinated and repelled the American public in equal measure. Wuornos' trial in 1992 divided public opinion. Her defense was consistent. She claimed that all the murders were committed in self-defense, arguing that the victims had tried to attack her. However, prosecutors painted a different picture, that of a killer who murdered in cold blood to rob her victims. The verdict was relentless, guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. Later, she would plead guilty to a 7th murder. The sentence, death penalty. Aileen Wuornos would become the 2nd woman in Florida and the 10th in the United States to be executed after the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976. Wuornos' final moments were as enigmatic as her life. She refused a special last meal, which could cost up to $20, opting only for a simple cup of coffee. Her last words were surprisingly peculiar, referencing movies and religion. Yes, I just want to say that I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus on June 6th, like the big mothership movie, and I'll be back. In 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection in Florida. After her death, following her wishes, her ashes were taken back to Michigan, her homeland, where they were scattered under a tree by her childhood friend, Dawn Botkins. The Wuornos case continues to fascinate the public and criminal behavior scholars. Her story generated books, documentaries, and even an award-winning film. More than just a series of crimes, her case raised important questions about abuse, trauma, justice, and the death penalty in American society. Aileen Wuornos' legacy remains as a dark reminder of the complexities of human nature and the criminal justice system. Her story is not just about the crimes she committed, but also about how society deals with its most disturbed members and the fine line between victim and perpetrator. To this day, decades after her execution, the case of Aileen Wuornos continues to generate debates about violence, gender, justice, and rehabilitation in the American penal system. Her life and death serve as a disturbing mirror of the flaws in our society and the price we pay for ignoring them. Mitchell Blair, the mother who tortured children with boiling water. Detroit, a city that had seen its share of crimes, was never prepared for what would be discovered in an apparently ordinary house on a routine workday. What started with a simple eviction order for non-payment would transform into one of the most horrifying cases of infanticide in modern American history. Mitchell Blair lived an apparently normal life in the eyes of neighbors. Nothing in her daily routine suggested the macabre secret she kept in her own kitchen. When court officers knocked on her door that fateful day, they expected to only carry out another eviction. After all, Blair had persistently refused to seek employment to pay her debts. But fate had other plans. While taking inventory of the house, the officers came across a freezer. What they found inside would freeze the blood of even the most experienced investigator. The bodies of Stephen and Stoney Blair, Mitchell's children, preserved in ice for 3 long years. The horror, however, was just beginning. As the investigation progressed, a story of unimaginable torture began to emerge. The children's last days were a living nightmare. Mitchell not only took their lives, she systematically tortured them in ways that defy human comprehension. The cruelty was methodical. She slowly suffocated them, tore off their skin, forced them to drink cleaning chemicals. As if that wasn't enough, she poured boiling water over their bodies. The screams, which certainly echoed through the walls of that house, remained silent for 3 years, preserved in ice along with their victims. In court, Blair showed an even more disturbing face. When questioned about her acts, she presented a defense that shocked even the most skeptical. She claimed to be killing demons that abused her children. But there was no evidence of abuse, only of her own systematic cruelty. Blair's behavior during the trial was as disturbing as her crimes. Showing not a hint of remorse, she frequently interrupted the judge. In a particularly chilling moment, when her surviving child declared he didn't want her to be released, her response was pure scorn. "You really think I was about to turn myself in because I heard that? Hell no, no, no," she declared coldly, before adding the words that would freeze the room. "And you don't feel remorse? I would kill again." The judge, when pronouncing the sentence, couldn't contain her disgust. As a mother, your primary responsibility was to protect your children, and in that aspect, you failed completely. The sentence was appropriately severe: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The last message. In an era where text messages are as common as breathing, no one would imagine they would be precisely what would reveal a brutal murder. In Pensacola, the messages received by Cassandra Waller from her partner, private investigator Taylor Wright, sounded strange, artificial, as if someone else was behind those words. She couldn't imagine how right she was. Taylor Wright dedicated her life to unraveling mysteries and finding missing persons, but in a cruel twist of fate, it would be she who needed to be found. The last reliable record of her existence? A meeting with Ashley McArthur, who would become the protagonist of a meticulously planned crime. The first sign that something was wrong was a $34,000 check deposited in Ashley's account, money that belonged to Taylor. For investigators, that deposit was like a beacon illuminating the path of suspicion. The answer to the mystery was buried on the McArthur family farm, literally. Ashley not only planned the murder, she thought of every detail, buying soil and cement specifically to build Taylor's improvised grave. The court would reveal an even darker aspect. Ashley McArthur wasn't a novice criminal. A previous 7-year sentence for extortion and fraud stained her record. The defense desperately tried to tarnish Taylor's reputation, but how to explain the money? How to justify the body buried on the family property? How to explain the fake messages sent after Taylor's death? "Ashley McArthur, you have been found guilty beyond reasonable doubt," declared the judge. The sentence, life in prison, with a minimum of 25 years before any possibility of parole. Today, while Ashley serves her sentence, the text messages she sent pretending to be Taylor remain as a macabre testament to her coldness. In a digital era, she tried to use technology to hide her crime, but it was precisely these same messages that helped reveal the truth. The investigator who spent her life uncovering secrets had her own mystery solved, albeit too late to save her. In Pensacola, the McArthur family farm keeps its scars in silence, while Taylor's last fake messages remain as a digital echo of a life interrupted by greed, a mystery that, when solved, revealed a darker truth than anyone could imagine: the parrot's testimony. In a story where fate has a morbid sense of humor, it was a parrot named Bud who revealed the truth behind an almost perfect crime. Glena Durham and her husband Martin lived an apparently normal life until financial problems began to erode their marriage. Glena's gambling addiction, combined with Martin's health problems resulting from an accident, led to the forced sale of their house. What seemed to be just another tragedy of a couple in difficulty took a macabre turn when a concerned neighbor decided to check on them. The scene they found seemed straight out of a horror movie. Both were lying on the floor, shot. Martin didn't survive, but Glena, despite a shot to the head, remained alive, though claiming not to remember anything about what happened. Near the bodies, investigators found the murder weapon and suicide notes written by Glena. Everything pointed to a classic case of homicide followed by attempted suicide. The story could have ended there, with just another tragic case in police files. But fate, in the form of a pet parrot, had other plans. 1 year after the incident, Bud, Martin's parrot, broke the silence of the case in the most unexpected way possible. The bird began to repeat the last words it had heard from its owner, words that would become crucial to the case. Like a macabre recording from the past, Bud reproduced Martin's final moments, revealing that Glena had shot her husband in the back before trying to take her own life. In court, Glena presented a disturbing mixture of confusion and anger, perhaps for what she had done, or perhaps for having failed in her suicide attempt. Her posture oscillated between that of a devastated widow and a criminal frustrated by her incomplete plan. The unusual testimony of the parrot, combined with physical evidence and suicide notes, sealed Glena's fate. She received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In a final irony, many wished she would receive the death penalty, exactly what she had tried to apply to herself on that fateful day. Isaac, the fury over hair extensions. What seemed to be a simple consumer complaint transformed into one of the most shocking stories in the judicial system. Isaac had bought hair extensions from Edie Tate and Edwina Thomas, but her dissatisfaction with the product led to a reaction that no one could predict. Instead of seeking a peaceful or legal solution to her complaint, Isaac chose the most brutal path possible. Without warning, she pulled out a gun and coldly shot both women. The attack not only took the lives of Edie and Edwina, but also that of Edwina's unborn child. 3 lives lost because of hair extensions. Initially, it seemed Isaac would escape justice when the charges were mysteriously withdrawn. However, a grand jury reversed this decision, reinstating the charges. In court, she tried one last dramatic performance, collapsing on the floor under the table. The judge and jury, however, remained unmoved by her theater. The verdict was clear: guilty. The 30-year prison sentence reflected the gravity of taking 3 lives over something as trivial as hair extensions. Isaac traded the courtroom carpet where she threw herself for the cold, hard floor of a prison cell, where she would have plenty of time to reflect on how a simple commercial dispute transformed into a heinous crime. Mia, the uncontrolled fury. What started as another argument between lovers ended in one of the most brutal crime scenes ever witnessed. Mia transformed a domestic fight into a horror festival when she decided to attack her boyfriend Marcel Hill, not just with a knife, but with any object she could find. The brutality of the attack was shocking. 11 stab wounds were not enough for her fury. Mia also used a frying pan and even a table as weapons to ensure Marcel would not survive. The crime scene revealed not just a murder, but an attack of uncontrolled rage. In court, instead of showing remorse, Mia presented behavior as disturbing as her crime. She tried to claim self-defense, but her constant interruptions and provocations to the judge told a different story. Her behavior was so defiant that the judge threatened to put adhesive tape on her mouth to keep her quiet. The situation became so unsustainable that her own lawyer gave up defending her, telling the judge to do what needed to be done. The result was a life sentence without the possibility of parole, with the judge's final words echoing the gravity of the crime. "I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison too." If you were shocked by today's cases, from the parrot that exposed a murder to a homicide over hair extensions, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any incredible stories like these. Tell us in the comments which case surprised you the most.